My son said, "From today you will pay rent for the room you're living in." His wife nodded in support. I just smiled. He didn't know that the house was actually, "I'm glad you're here with me." Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. My life had been quiet and predictable for the past 3 years. Ever since my husband Robert passed away, I lived in our family home, a modest 2-story house in suburban Ohio that we'd bought 30 years ago, when our son Michael was just 5. The mortgage had been paid off for over a decade. I spent my days tending to my garden, volunteering at the local library, and video calling with my daughter Susan, who lived in California with her own family. Michael had always been my cautious child. Where Susan was adventurous and independent, Michael needed structure approval guidance. After college, he'd married Jessica, a sharp-tongued woman with perfectly manicured nails and an MBA she mentioned in every conversation. They'd struggled financially for years, bouncing between rental apartments, and I'd helped them more times than I could count. Last year, when they lost their lease, I'd offered them my spare bedroom. "Just until you get back on your feet," I'd said. That was 14 months ago. At first, everything seemed fine. Jessica cooked elaborate dinners. Michael mowed the lawn without being asked, and we'd watch old movies together on Friday nights. But gradually, things shifted. Jessica started rearranging my kitchen cabinets without asking. Michael began making comments about how I wasted electricity by leaving lights on. Small criticisms wrapped in concern. I told myself they were stressed that finding a new place was taking longer than expected. Then came the dinner that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening in late September. I'd made pot roast, Michael's childhood favorite. We were seated around the dining table, the same oak table where I'd served thousands of family meals. When Michael cleared his throat in that particular way that meant he'd rehearsed something. "Mom, we need to talk about the living situation," he said, not meeting my eyes. I set down my fork. "Of course, dear. Have you found a new apartment?" Jessica's laugh was sharp brittle. "Found a new apartment, Margaret, we've been thinking. You have this entire house to yourself." "Well, you did. It's too much for one person to maintain. I managed just fine," I replied, keeping my voice steady. Michael shifted uncomfortably. "The thing is, Mom, with today's real estate market, it doesn't make financial sense for us to rent elsewhere when you have all this space. We've been contributing to groceries and utilities, but we think it's time to formalize the arrangement." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Formalize. "Starting next month," Jessica said, leaning forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You'll need to pay rent for your bedroom. We've calculated fair market value for a single room in this area. $800 per month should be reasonable." The words hit me like ice water. Pay rent in my own home. "Jessica, I don't understand. This is my house." "Robert and I actually," Jessica interrupted, pulling out her phone. "We've been doing research. In most states, when adult children provide care and housing management for elderly parents, certain legal considerations come into play. We're not asking for much, Margaret, just your fair share." Michael finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my heart sink. Not cruelty, but weakness. He was letting this happen. My son, whom I'd raised, sacrificed for loved unconditionally, was nodding along with his wife's absurd demands. "This is ridiculous," I said quietly. "I own this house. My name is on the deed." "For now," Jessica replied, her voice honey sweet and venomous. "But you're getting older, Margaret. You forget things. Last week you left the stove on. What if something happened to you? Michael is your only son in the state. It would be so much simpler if we made this official. If you signed the house over to us, you wouldn't have to worry about property taxes, maintenance, any of it. We'd take care of everything and you could just live here peacefully." I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his wife she was being unreasonable. Instead, he reached over and patted my hand. "Think about it, Mom. No pressure. But the rent starts December 1st. I smiled then. I actually smiled because in that moment I understood everything with perfect clarity. They didn't know after all these years, after all those conversations about the house, about Robert's careful planning. They had no idea about the trust, the legal protections, the ironclad documentation my husband had insisted on. They thought I was just a confused old woman they could manipulate. They had no idea what was coming. That night, I lay awake in my bedroom in my house, and counted everything I'd lost. Not possessions people trust, the illusion that blood meant loyalty. Robert had died 3 years ago, but I'd never felt more alone than I did in that moment. My daughter Susan was thousands of miles away, busy with her own life, her own children. We talked, yes, but would she believe me if I told her what Michael was doing? Would she think I was exaggerating, becoming paranoid in my old age? The doubt crept in like fog. I thought about my friends from the library, from church, from the neighborhood. What would they say if I told them my son was demanding rent? Some would be sympathetic, surely, but others. I could already hear the whispers. Well, he does live there too now. Maybe it's fair. She's getting older, you know. Maybe she's not seeing it clearly. The fear was real, sharp, immediate. What if they succeeded? What if somehow through manipulation or legal trickery, they actually managed to take my home? I had my pension, yes, and Social Security. But $800 a month would devastate my budget. I'd have nothing left for medications, for the small pleasures that made life bearable. I'd become completely dependent on them. Was that their plan? Make me financially desperate so I'd have no choice but to sign over the house. I got out of bed at 2 a.m., my hands shaking slightly, and went to Robert's old study. We'd converted it to a guest room when Michael moved in, but I knew where everything was. The filing cabinet in the closet second drawer down. Inside were folders organized with Robert's meticulous precision. Deed insurance medical records, legal documents. I pulled out the folder labeled Trust and Estate. Robert had been an accountant, careful and thorough in all things. When we paid off the mortgage, he'd insisted we set up a revocable living trust. If something happens to me, he'd said, I don't want you dealing with probate with complications. Everything will be protected. I spread the documents across the small desk, turning on the reading lamp. My eyes scanned the familiar pages, and with each paragraph, something hard and cold formed in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something sharper, clarity. The house wasn't just in my name. It was held in the Robert and Margaret Chen family trust with me as the sole trustee after Robert's death. Michael and Susan were listed as beneficiaries, yes, but only after my death. During my lifetime, I had complete control. The trust explicitly stated that no beneficiary had any claim or interest in the property until distribution occurred. I couldn't help but wonder, had Michael seen these documents? Had Jessica? When we'd talked about inheritance over the years, had they simply assumed the house would pass through a simple will, something they could contest or manipulate? There was more. A letter from our estate attorney dated just 6 months before Robert's death, confirming the trust structure and noting that we'd added a provision. Any attempt by a beneficiary to unduly influence the trustee or challenge the trust during the trustee's lifetime would result in automatic disinheritance. Robert had known somehow my careful husband had anticipated exactly this kind of situation. I sat back in the chair, my heart racing. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't some confused old woman who could be bullied out of her own home. I had legal protection, ironclad documentation, and the truth on my side. But that wasn't enough. If I simply confronted them with the documents, they might back off temporarily, but the resentment would fester. Jessica would find another way to push me out. Michael would be caught between us, and I'd lose my son completely. No, I needed something more strategic. I needed to let them reveal themselves, completely expose their true intentions, and then when they were fully committed to their scheme, when they thought they'd won, that's when I would act. I needed evidence, documentation, witnesses. I needed to protect myself not just legally, but socially, emotionally, practically. The plan began forming in my mind piece by piece. First, I would document everything, every conversation, every demand, every manipulation. Second, I would quietly consult with the estate attorney, make sure all documents were updated and airtight. Third, I would reach out carefully, selectively to people I could trust, build a support network they didn't know about, and I would let them think they were winning. Let them get comfortable, confident, careless. As dawn broke through the study window, I carefully returned the documents to their folder. My hands were no longer shaking. The fear was still there, yes, but it was fuel now. Motivation. Michael wanted to play games with his elderly mother. Jessica wanted to scheme and manipulate. They were about to learn that age hadn't made me weak. It had made me patient, wise, and absolutely unwilling to surrender what Robert and I had built together. The war hadn't started with that dinner, but that's when I decided to fight. On Thursday morning, I called Lawrence and Associates, the law firm Robert had worked with for our estate planning. I kept my voice steady when the receptionist answered, professional and calm, as if I were simply checking on routine paperwork. "This is Margaret Chen. I need to schedule a consultation with Mr. Lawrence regarding my family trust. Of course, Mrs. Chen, is this concerning updates to the trust documents?" I glanced toward the closed door of my bedroom. I could hear Jessica's voice downstairs talking on her phone. "Yes, and I need to discuss protections against potential undue influence. It's somewhat urgent." There was a pause. "I see Mr. Lawrence has an opening tomorrow at 10 a.m. Would that work perfect? And please note, I'll need documentation of this appointment, copies of all related correspondence for my personal records." After I hung up, I opened a new notebook I'd purchased the day before. At the top of the first page, I wrote September 28, 2024. First documentation. Then I began recording everything. The dinner conversation, Michael's exact words, Jessica's thinly veiled threats, the date the rent was supposed to begin, every detail I could remember. I just finished writing when I heard footsteps on the stairs. My bedroom door was ajar, and through the gap I saw Jessica pause on the landing, her eyes narrowing as she looked at my closed door. Had she heard me on the phone, I kept my expression neutral, my breathing steady. Downstairs, I found Michael making coffee. He looked tired, uncomfortable. Good. Maybe there was still some conscience left in him. "Morning, Mom," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Good morning, dear." I poured myself orange juice, keeping my movements unhurried. "I have some errands in town today. I'll be out most of the morning." Errands. Jessica appeared in the doorway, freshly showered and dressed like she was heading to a board meeting. "What kind of errands?" I smiled blandly. "Oh, just the usual. Library, pharmacy, lunch with a friend." "Which friend?" The question was sharp suspicious. "Carol Jensen, we volunteer together." It was true. Carol and I did volunteer together. I simply didn't mention that we hadn't scheduled lunch. The lie came easily, smoothly. I was learning. Jessica exchanged a glance with Michael. "You've been going out a lot lately." "I enjoy staying active," I replied. "Isn't that what you're always saying I should do? Not stay cooped up in the house." I could see the frustration in Jessica's expression. She wanted to object but couldn't without revealing her desire to monitor my movements. The appointment with Mr. Lawrence went exactly as I'd hoped. He was a man in his early 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. When I explained the situation carefully, factually, without emotional embellishment, his expression darkened. "Mrs. Chen, what you're describing is potential elder financial abuse. the demand for rent from your own home, the suggestion that you sign over the deed. These are classic manipulation tactics. I suspected as much, but I have the trust documents. I'm protected, aren't I, legally? Yes. The trust is solid. Your son and daughter-in-law have no legal claim to the property during your lifetime. However, he leaned forward. Protection on paper only works if it's enforced. If you were to be intimidated into signing a quit-claim deed, or if they managed to have you declared incompetent. My blood ran cold. Could they do that? They could try. You mentioned Jessica said you left the stove on. If they build a case that you're no longer capable of managing your affairs, they could petition for guardianship. It's not easy, but it's possible. What do I need to do? Mr. Lawrence pulled out a legal pad. First, we document everything, every conversation, every demand, every threat, no matter how subtle. Second, I'm going to draft a letter to your son and daughter-in-law, reminding them of the trust structure and their lack of legal claim to the property. It will be professional, but firm. Third, we're going to have you evaluated by a physician. Cognitive function, mental competency. Get it documented that you're of sound mind. Won't that antagonize them? Possibly, but right now they think you're vulnerable. We need to demonstrate strength, establish boundaries, and Mrs. Chen. He looked at me seriously. If they escalate, if there's any hint of physical intimidation threats or theft, you call me immediately, and you call the police. I left his office with a folder full of documents and a copy of the letter he would be sending to Michael's attention. My hands were steady now. This was real. This was happening. But when I got home, I knew immediately that something had changed. The house was too quiet. Jessica's car was in the driveway, but there was no sound of television, no voices. I found them in the dining room, sitting at the table with papers spread out in front of them. They looked up when I entered, and Jessica's smile was triumphant. "Margaret, we need to talk about your finances." My stomach clenched. "Excuse me." Michael looked miserable. "Mom, we found your bank statements in the recycling bin. We were just trying to help organize the house, and you went through my recycling." "That's not the point," Jessica interrupted. "The point is, we can see exactly how much you're spending. Your pension and Social Security combined give you almost $3,200 per month. You can easily afford $800 in rent. In fact, you've been quite wasteful with your money." I stared at her, understanding dawning. They'd been planning this, gathering information, building their case. "You had no right to look at my financial documents. We have every right," Jessica snapped. "We live here. We support you. Michael is your son. He has a responsibility to make sure you're managing your money properly, and frankly, Margaret, you're not. Look at this." She held up a statement. "You donated $200 to the library last month, $150 to some charity. That's our money you're giving away. It's my money and you don't support me. I support you. This is my house for now." Or, Jessica's voice was ice. "But we've been talking to people, Margaret, lawyers, financial advisors, and they all agree. At your age, with your circumstances, it makes sense to transfer assets to family members' estate planning, avoiding taxes. It's just smart." I looked at Michael, silently begging him to intervene. He opened his mouth, then closed it, said nothing. That's when I knew this wasn't Michael being weak. This was Michael being complicit. He'd made his choice. "I see," I said quietly. "Well, you'll be receiving a letter from my attorney shortly. I suggest you read it carefully." The look on Jessica's face was priceless. Pure shock followed quickly by rage. "Your attorney." I smiled the same smile I'd given them at that first dinner. Did you really think I wouldn't protect myself? Did you honestly believe I was that foolish? I walked to my room and closed the door, my heart pounding. Behind me, I heard Jessica's voice, sharp and angry. "She's bluffing. She has to be." But I wasn't bluffing. and now they knew it. The war had truly begun. The letter from Mr. Lawrence arrived by certified mail on Monday morning. I watched from my bedroom window as Michael signed for it, his hand shaking slightly. Jessica appeared at his shoulder, immediately snatching the envelope from his hands. I didn't go downstairs. I waited. The explosion came within minutes. Jessica's voice carried through the entire house, shrill and furious. "This is insane. She can't do this. Michael, your mother is trying to cut you out of your inheritance." I couldn't hear Michael's response, but Jessica's reply was crystal clear. "I don't care what the lawyer says. This is elder abuse. She's being manipulated by that attorney. We need to act fast." I documented everything in my notebook, the date, the time, their reactions. Then I made several phone calls. First to my daughter, Susan, in California. "Honey, I need you to know something. I love you and I love your brother. But there's a situation developing and I need you to have the facts." I told her everything. Susan's initial disbelief turned to anger, then resolve. "Mom, I'm booking a flight. I'll be there this weekend. You don't have to." "Yes, I do. You shouldn't face this alone." My second call was to Carol Jensen, my volunteering friend. I was honest with her. "Carol, I hate to ask, but I need someone who can witness conversations, someone who can confirm I'm of sound mind if it ever comes to that. Would you be willing to visit regularly, Margaret, of course? I had a feeling something was wrong. You've seemed stressed lately. What do you need? Just your presence maybe once or twice a week. And if you notice anything concerning anything at all, I need you to document it. Consider it done." By Wednesday, I'd seen Dr. Patricia Moore, my physician for the past 15 years. She conducted a thorough cognitive evaluation, memory tests, reasoning exercises, mental status examination. At the end, she looked at me seriously. "Margaret, your cognitive function is completely normal. Better than normal, frankly." "Why did you need this documented?" I explained. Her expression hardened. "I'll prepare a letter for your attorney stating that you're of sound mind and capable of managing your own affairs. And Margaret, be careful. I've seen cases like this before." That evening, I was making dinner when Jessica and Michael cornered me in the kitchen. Jessica's face was flushed, her eyes bright with anger barely contained. "We need to talk now." I turned off the stove. "I'm listening." Michael stepped forward. "Mom, this letter from your lawyer, it's hurtful. It's like you don't trust us." "I don't," I said simply. "You demanded rent from me in my own home. You went through my private financial documents. Why would I trust you?" "We were trying to help." Jessica's voice rose. "You're being manipulated by that lawyer. He's probably charging you a fortune, draining your savings. My financial situation is none of your concern. It is when you're throwing away our inheritance." Jessica slammed her hand on the counter. "That house is worth at least $400,000 more in this market, and you're giving it all away to attorneys and charities while we're living in a single bedroom struggling. You're not entitled to my assets while I'm alive," I said quietly. "The trust is clear. And if you continue this behavior, you may not be entitled to anything after I'm gone either." Michael's face went white. "Mom, you can't mean that. Read the trust document. There's a clause about undue influence. If you attempt to manipulate or coerce me regarding my estate, you can be disinherited. Your father insisted on that provision." Jessica's laugh was bitter. "Your precious Robert. Always so controlling, even from the grave." "Well, we'll see what a judge says about that. Michael, your mother is clearly not competent to manage her affairs. Look at her making wild accusations threatening her own son. We need to petition for guardianship." The threat hung in the air like poison. I felt ice in my veins. "If you attempt that," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I will fight you with every resource I have. I have documentation from my physician. I have witnesses to your behavior. I have financial records showing my competent management of my affairs. And I have an attorney who specializes in elder law. You will lose. We'll see about that. Jessica grabbed Michael's arm. Come on. We're going out. When we get back, I expect you to have reconsidered this ridiculous position. They left the door slamming behind them. I stood in the kitchen, my hands gripping the counter, my whole body shaking, not from fear this time, from rage, from the adrenaline of confrontation. They'd threatened guardianship. They'd shown their true intentions completely. This wasn't about fair rent or reasonable expectations. This was about control, about taking everything I had. But I'd stood my ground. I hadn't crumbled. I hadn't given in. The next 3 days, I barely saw them. They came and went at odd hours, avoiding me. I used the time to rest to recover from the emotional toll of the confrontation. Susan called daily. Carol visited twice, bringing groceries and companionship. Dr. Moore's letter arrived, a professional statement of my complete mental competency. I was building my fortress layer by layer, document by document, witness by witness, and I was preparing for whatever came next. The shift happened on Saturday morning. I woke to the smell of bacon and coffee. Real coffee, not instant. When I came downstairs, wary and alert, I found the kitchen transformed. Jessica was at the stove wearing an apron I'd never seen before, cooking a full breakfast. Michael was setting the table with the good china. Good morning, Mom. Michael's smile was bright nervous. We wanted to make you breakfast. As an apology, I stood in the doorway evaluating. An apology, Jessica turned her expression carefully arranged into something resembling warmth. Margaret, we've been awful, really, truly awful. Michael and I talked all night and we realized we've been putting our stress and financial problems on you. It wasn't fair. She brought a plate to the table. Bacon, eggs, toast, fresh fruit arranged beautifully. Please sit. Let's start over. I sat, but I didn't touch the food. Not yet. What changed? Michael shifted uncomfortably. We talked to Jessica's parents. They pointed out that we were being ungrateful. You opened your home to us when we had nowhere to go, and we repaid you with demands and accusations. We're sorry, Mom, really. We want to make it right, Jessica added, sitting across from me. Her smile was perfect practiced. The rent, forget it. Ridiculous idea. This is your house. We're guests here, and we should have been treating you with respect and gratitude. I picked up my fork, cut into the eggs. They were cooked exactly how I liked them. And the attorney's letter, water under the bridge. Jessica said quickly, you had every right to protect yourself. We scared you, and that's our fault. We're not going to pursue guardianship or anything like that. We just want peace, family harmony. I ate slowly, thinking this was a tactic, an obvious tactic. They'd consulted someone, maybe a lawyer, maybe just someone smarter than they were, and been told they had no legal standing. So now they were trying manipulation of a different kind. Kindness as a weapon. I appreciate the breakfast, I said finally, and I appreciate the apology. But I think it's time we discussed you finding your own place. Michael's face fell. Mom, you've been here 14 months. You're both capable employed adults. Surely you've saved enough for first and last month's rent somewhere. Jessica's mask slipped for just a second, a flash of anger in her eyes. Then the smile returned. We could. Yes, but Margaret, we've been thinking, why should we move out? This house is so big and you're here all alone most of the time. What if we stayed, but we made it more official? We could pay actual rent market rate and help with maintenance. You'd have income companionship and we'd have affordable housing. Everyone wins. No, I said simply. No, Jessica's voice sharpened. Just like that, you won't even consider. No, I want my home back. I want my privacy. I want to live without walking on eggshells, without wondering what you're going through in my recycling, without being made to feel like a burden in my own house. Michael reached across the table. Mom, please. We made mistakes, but we're family. Don't throw us out. I pulled my hand back. I'm giving you 30 days notice. That's generous and legal. Use that time to find an apartment. I'll even help with moving expenses if money is truly tight. The transformation in Jessica's face was remarkable. The warmth evaporated like morning dew, leaving cold calculation behind. 30 days. I see. Well, Margaret, I think you're making a terrible mistake. You're old, you're alone, and you're burning bridges with the only family you have nearby. My daughter is flying in this evening, I said calmly. She'll be staying with me for a week, and I have plenty of friends who've offered support. Susan Michael looked panicked. You called Susan Mom. What did you tell her? The truth. Jessica stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. Michael, your mother is clearly having some kind of episode. First the paranoia about the trust. Now she's turning your own sister against you. I haven't turned anyone against anyone. I simply told Susan what's been happening. She chose to come support me. The doorbell rang. Jessica and Michael exchanged glances. I rose, unhurried, and went to answer it. Carol stood on the porch holding a casserole dish. Good morning, Margaret. I brought that chicken dish you liked. Thought we could have lunch together today. She looked past me into the house, her gaze sharp and assessing. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you entertaining? Not at all. Michael and Jessica were just finishing breakfast. Please come in. I introduced them, watching as Carol took in the scene with the practiced eye of a retired social worker. She'd been one for 30 years before retiring. She knew dysfunction when she saw it. It's lovely to meet you both, Carol said pleasantly. Margaret talks about you so often, Michael. You're lucky to have such a wonderful mother. The subtle emphasis on lucky wasn't lost on anyone. Jessica's smile was strained. Yes, we're very grateful for everything she's done for us. I'm sure you are. Carol turned to me. Margaret, shall we have tea in the living room? I have so much to tell you about the library fundraiser. Over the next few hours, Carol's presence created a buffer, a witness, a reality check. When Susan arrived that evening, efficient, successful Susan, with her lawyer husband and her no-nonsense attitude, the power dynamic shifted completely. Susan pulled Michael aside. I heard her voice sharp and disappointed. What were you thinking? Demanding rent from Mom. Have you lost your mind? That night, the five of us sat in the living room. Susan laid everything out with legal precision. The trust structure, my rights, their complete lack of claim to the property. Jessica tried to argue, to spin, to justify. Susan shut her down every time. You have 30 days, Susan said, finally. If you're not out by then, Mom will pursue formal eviction. And trust me, that will be on your record. You won't be able to rent anywhere decent. Michael looked at me, his eyes pleading. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Maybe he meant it. Maybe he was just sorry he'd been caught. I didn't know anymore. And the sad truth was I didn't have the energy to figure it out. 30 days, I repeated. Use them wisely. Susan returned to California after a week, reassured that I was handling the situation, but worried nonetheless. Call me every day, Mom. I mean it. And if they do anything threatening, call the police immediately for the first 2 weeks of the 30-day notice period. Michael and Jessica kept their distance. They came home late, left early, and avoided common areas when I was present. The house existed in cold, tense silence. I documented their movements, kept my bedroom door locked at night, and continued my routine of meeting with Carol and other friends. Then on day 17, they asked for a family meeting. It was Sunday evening. I was reading in the living room when Michael appeared looking haggarded and older than his 40 years. Mom, Jessica, and I would like to talk with you. Really talk. No arguments, no demands, just conversation. Please, against my better judgment, I agreed. We sat in the dining room, neutral territory, with cups of tea that Jessica had prepared. I didn't drink mine. I wasn't paranoid exactly, but I wasn't stupid either. Margaret Jessica began her tone conciliatory. We've had time to reflect, and we realize we approached everything wrong. We were stressed, scared about our financial situation, and we lashed out at the wrong person. You've been nothing but generous. I appreciate you saying that. The thing is, Michael continued, we've been looking at apartments, and the market it's brutal. Everything is so expensive. Anything we can afford is either too far from our jobs or in neighborhoods that aren't safe. We're trying, but we need more time, Jessica interrupted. Just another 60 days, 3 months total. That will give us enough time to save more for a deposit to find something suitable. And during that time, we'll pay you rent. Real rent. Whatever you think is fair. I looked at them both, seeing the calculation behind Jessica's eyes, the weakness in Michael's posture. The answer is no. Jessica's smile tightened. Margaret, be reasonable. We're not asking for charity. We'll pay our way. You've had 14 months to save money. What have you been doing with your income all this time? The question hung in the air. Michael looked away. Jessica's expression hardened. That's none of your business. Then my decision is final. You have 13 days left. I suggest you use them productively. Jessica stood abruptly. You know what your problem is, Margaret. You're bitter. You've been bitter since Robert died, and you're taking it out on us. You don't want family around because you want to play the lonely widow, the martyr. Jessica. Michael reached for her arm, but she shook him off. No, she needs to hear this. You sit in this big house all alone, hoarding it like some jealous dragon. Your own son needs help, and you'd rather throw him out on the street than show a shred of compassion. What kind of mother does that? I stood slowly, my voice quiet but firm. A mother who recognizes manipulation. A mother who won't be controlled or bullied. A mother who knows that enabling destructive behavior isn't love, it's harm. Destructive behavior. Jessica's laugh was sharp, cruel. We asked you to contribute to household expenses. That's not manipulation. That's reality. But you couldn't handle the idea that you're not the one in control anymore. You're an old woman clinging to power, and it's pathetic. That's enough. Michael finally found his voice. Jessica, stop. Why she needs to hear the truth. Look at her, Michael. She's pushing 70. How much longer does she really think she can manage this place alone? What happens when she falls and breaks a hip? When her memory really does start going? She needs us more than we need her, and she's too proud to admit it. I walked to the front door and opened it. Get out. Well, Jessica blinked. Get out of my house now, both of you. Pack your essentials tonight. You can come back with a police escort to get the rest during daylight hours, but I want you gone now. You can't just kick us out in the middle of the night. Jessica shrieked. That's illegal. Actually, you've been given proper notice. You're now trespassing. Leave or I call the police. Your choice. Michael looked torn, frightened. Mom, please, you chose her, I said, looking at my son. Over and over. You chose her. You stood by while she insulted me, threatened me, tried to steal my home. You don't get to call me Mom in that pleading voice and expect me to crumble. Leave. Jessica grabbed her purse. Her face twisted with rage. This isn't over. You think you've won. We'll sue you for illegal eviction. We'll tell everyone in this town what you're really like. You'll do what you need to do and I'll do the same. Goodbye, Jessica. They left, finally, Michael casting one last desperate look over his shoulder. I closed the door behind them, locked it, and stood in the sudden silence of my house. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding, but I'd done it. I'd stood firm. I'd protected myself. I called Susan immediately. They're gone. They'll probably come back for their things, but they're gone. Mom, are you okay? Are you safe? I'm fine. I'm better than fine. I'm free. I called Mr. Lawrence next, leaving a message about the evening's events. Then I called Carol, who offered to come over immediately. I declined. I needed this night alone, needed to sit in my own house, my own space, and feel the weight of what I'd accomplished. For the first time in months, I slept deeply, peacefully, without fear of what might happen while I was vulnerable. Michael and Jessica returned 3 days later with a police officer and a moving truck. I'd expected this. Mr. Lawrence had advised me on the proper procedure. I remained calm, civil, documenting everything with my phone's camera. The officer, a young woman named Ramirez, spoke to me respectfully. Ma'am, they have a right to collect their belongings. Are you willing to allow that? Of course. I have a list of their possessions. Nothing else leaves this house. Jessica's eyes narrowed. A list you inventoried our things. I documented everything in the house that isn't mine. Standard procedure in an eviction. They loaded their belongings in tense silence. Michael looked defeated, broken. Jessica looked murderous. When they finished, Jessica turned to Officer Ramirez. I want to file a report, elder abuse. This woman has been displaying signs of dementia, and her daughter manipulated her into throwing us out so she could inherit everything. I felt a chill, but Mr. Lawrence had prepared me for this. I pulled out a folder from my bag. I'd been carrying it everywhere for days. Officer, I have documentation here from my physician confirming my mental competency, evaluated just 3 weeks ago. I also have documentation of the demands made by my son and daughter-in-law, including their requirement that I pay rent in my own home, their attempts to access my financial information without permission, and their threats to pursue guardianship. Officer Ramirez looked through the papers. Ma'am, this looks pretty comprehensive. Do you feel you're in danger? Not physically, but financially and emotionally, yes. They've attempted to manipulate me into signing over my property. Jessica's face flushed. That's a lie. Michael is her son. He has every right to be concerned about her welfare. This house is falling apart. She can't maintain it alone. We were trying to help, and she twisted everything. Officer, I interrupted quietly. Would you like to see the certified letter my attorney sent them, outlining the structure of my family trust and their complete lack of legal claim to this property? Or the messages Jessica sent to my daughter, threatening to make sure that regrets this, Jessica went white. You have my messages. Susan forwarded them to me. All of them, including the ones where you discussed hiring a lawyer to have me declared incompetent, the ones where you calculated the value of my estate, the ones where you joked about how the old bat won't last much longer anyway. Michael looked at Jessica with horror. You said what I was angry. She was destroying our lives. She was protecting herself. Officer Ramirez said firmly, Ma'am, I don't see any basis for an elder abuse claim here. In fact, from what I'm seeing, you two might want to be careful about your own legal exposure. Attempting to coerce someone into signing over property threats of false guardianship claims those are serious matters. We're done here, I said. Please leave my property and don't return. But the real confrontation came 2 weeks later, when I received a letter from an attorney representing Michael and Jessica. They were challenging the family trust, claiming undue influence by Robert, claiming that I was mentally incompetent when the trust was created, claiming that the disinheritance clause was invalid. Mr. Lawrence's response was swift and devastating. We filed a motion for summary judgment attaching every piece of evidence I'd collected, the recordings of conversations legal in our one-party consent state, the messages, the physician evaluations, the witnesses' statements, the timeline of events. The hearing was held on a gray December morning. I sat in the courtroom with Susan on one side and Mr. Lawrence on the other. Michael and Jessica sat across the aisle with their attorney, a harried-looking man who clearly hadn't expected such thorough documentation. The judge, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, reviewed the evidence. She asked Michael and Jessica's attorney several pointed questions, which he struggled to answer. Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Chen, you created this trust with your late husband in 2012. Correct? Yes, Your Honor. At that time, were you coerced in any way? No, Your Honor. My husband and I made the decision together with legal counsel to protect our assets for our future and our children's inheritance. And the clause regarding undue influence. Whose idea was that my husband's? He worked in accounting and had seen cases where family members pressured elderly relatives. He wanted to ensure I would be protected if anything happened to him." The judge looked at Michael. "Mr. Chen, do you have any evidence, any actual evidence that your mother lacks mental capacity?" Michael's attorney started to speak, but the judge held up her hand. "I'm asking your client, counselor." Michael looked at me, then away. "No, Your Honor. My wife and I, we made mistakes. We were stressed about money and we pushed too hard. But my mother she's competent sharp, actually. Always has been." Jessica hissed something, but Michael ignored her. The judge's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate your honesty. However, the evidence presented shows a pattern of financial manipulation threats and attempts to coerce your mother into surrendering her property. The trust is valid. The disinheritance clause is valid. And frankly, based on what I've seen, you're fortunate your mother isn't pursuing criminal charges for elder abuse. She brought her gavel down. Motion granted. The trust remains intact. Case dismissed." In the hallway afterward, Jessica turned on Michael. "You weak, pathetic. You just gave up. You let her win." "She already won," Michael said quietly. "She won because she was right and we were wrong. I'm done, Jessica. I'm done with schemes and shortcuts and trying to take what isn't ours." He walked away from her toward me. I stood very still, waiting. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking, "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know. I see now what I did, what we did, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I looked at my son, my boy who'd once brought me dandelions, who'd cried in my arms after his first heartbreak, who'd somehow lost his way. "I know you are," I said, "but sorry doesn't undo the damage. Maybe someday, Michael. Maybe someday we can rebuild, but not today." I walked past him out into the winter sunlight with Susan's hand in mine. I'd won. The divorce papers arrived at my house 6 weeks later. Michael was listed as the recipient, but they'd been forwarded from his last known address, which turned out to be his car. He'd been living in his vehicle for 2 weeks after Jessica threw him out of the cheap motel they'd been staying in when their money ran out. Susan opened the envelope by accident, thinking it was for me. She called immediately. "Mom, Michael, and Jessica are getting divorced. Did you know? No, but I'm not surprised. Their relationship was built on greed, not love. Take away the money motivation and there was nothing left. There's more. Jessica has apparently left the state." And Michael Susan paused. "He's asking if he can call you just to talk. He's not asking for money or anything else, just to talk." I sat with that for a long moment. Not yet. Maybe someday, but not yet. The wound is too fresh. But the universe wasn't done with Michael and Jessica. Carol, who had a talent for hearing local gossip, filled me in over coffee one morning. Jessica was fired from her job, Carol said. Apparently, her boss found out about the court case. Someone sent him copies of the filing's embezzlement concerns. They did an audit and found discrepancies in her expense reports. Nothing huge, but consistent. She was padding her expenses, claiming personal purchases as business costs. They fired her over that. Fired her, and they're pursuing legal action. She can't get another job in her field. Word travels fast in corporate accounting circles. Last I heard, she moved back to her parents' place in Idaho. They're not happy. They knew about what she tried to do to you and they're ashamed. I felt no satisfaction in Jessica's downfall, but I felt no sympathy either. She'd made her choices. Michael's situation was more complex. After the divorce was finalized, he lost his own job not for misconduct, but for performance issues. The stress of everything had destroyed his focus. He'd spent weeks living out of his car, too proud to ask for help, too ashamed to face anyone who knew what he'd done. Finally, he'd swallowed his pride and called Susan. She'd helped him find a tiny studio apartment and a job in warehouse logistics. Nothing glamorous, but honest work. She'd done it without telling me, respecting my need for space and time. Meanwhile, my life transformed in ways I hadn't expected. The house felt like mine again. I cleaned every room, removing traces of Michael and Jessica's presence. I repainted the guest bedroom bright yellow, cheerful and warm. I replaced the curtains they'd stained, fixed the closet door they'd broken, restored every space to the way Robert and I had kept it. Carol introduced me to a widows support group that met weekly at the community center. I'd resisted at first, thinking I didn't need it. But the women there understood loss, understood family betrayal. Several had their own difficult children, understood the strength required to stand alone. One woman, Patricia, had survived 3 years of her son stealing from her before she pressed charges. Hardest thing I ever did, she told me. But it saved both our lives. Sometimes love means saying no, means protecting yourself first. I volunteered more at the library. I joined a book club. I took a watercolor painting class at the senior center, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for when Robert was alive. When I was busy being a wife, a mother, the support system for everyone else, Susan visited more frequently, bringing her children. My grandchildren filled the house with noise and laughter. We made cookies in the kitchen. We played board games in the living room. They knew vaguely that Uncle Mike had made some mistakes, but I didn't burden them with details. That was between the adults. Mr. Lawrence helped me update my trust documents, making everything airtight. Susan was now the primary beneficiary. Michael remained in the trust, but with strict conditions. He would receive his portion only after demonstrating 5 years of financial responsibility, no contact with Jessica, and completion of family therapy. "You're giving him a path back," Mr. Lawrence observed. "I'm giving him a chance to earn back what he threw away. Whether he takes it is up to him." The final piece of my victory came unexpectedly. A neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, approached me at the grocery store. "Margaret, I heard about what happened with your son. I want you to know I think you're incredibly brave. My sister went through something similar and she didn't have the strength to fight back. She lost everything. You didn't, and I admire that." Others echoed the sentiment. The story had spread through our small community, not as gossip, but as a cautionary tale and an inspiration. Other elderly homeowners consulted with their own attorneys, updated their estate documents, protected themselves. I'd become inadvertently an advocate, a voice for those who couldn't speak up, who were being manipulated and controlled by family members they trusted. 6 months after the court hearing, I hosted Thanksgiving dinner. Susan and her family came. Carol joined us along with Patricia from the support group and 2 other women I'd befriended. We filled my dining room, my table with food and laughter and genuine warmth. Michael wasn't there, but the door wasn't locked forever. Just for now, I'd won more than a legal battle. I'd won back my dignity, my independence, my sense of self. I'd proven that age didn't mean weakness, that being kind didn't mean being a victim. I'd won my life back. A year passed, and my life transformed completely. I turned 70 with 50 friends celebrating in my blooming garden. I spoke monthly at the senior center about elder financial protection. My watercolor paintings sold at fundraisers. I traveled to Maine with Susan. My house became a gathering place filled with genuine laughter. Michael was slowly rebuilding, working, steadily attending therapy. He sent cards. "I'm sorry, I love you." I kept them in a drawer, not forgotten. Not forgiven yet, but not closed off. Jessica's life collapsed. She moved back to Idaho where her disappointed parents barely tolerated her. Her embezzlement case destroyed her savings, fired and blacklisted. She worked as a cashier, a humiliating fall. The divorce favored Michael. She paid him spousal support. Her social media victim posts backfired spectacularly when people shared the truth. Meanwhile, I sat in my garden painting roses, surrounded by sunshine and bird song. I was free. I was safe. I'd won my life back. They say blood is thicker than water, but I learned. The full saying is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The family you choose can be stronger than the family you're born into. I'm sharing this story because someone needs to hear it. Maybe you're facing something similar. Maybe someone you love is being manipulated. Maybe you're afraid to stand up for yourself because they're family, and family is supposed to be sacred. But here's what I learned. Real love doesn't demand your dignity as payment. Real family doesn't threaten or manipulate. Protecting yourself isn't betrayal, it's survival. Document everything. Know your legal rights. Build a support system outside of family. Consult professionals. Don't be ashamed to seek help. And most importantly, understand that saying no to abuse isn't cruel, it's necessary. What would you do in my situation? Would you have fought, or would you have given in to keep the peace? I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, your advice for others facing similar situations. Leave a comment below. Subscribe if this story resonated with you. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you are never too old to stand up for yourself. You are never too old to reclaim your life. Your strength is greater than you know.